Now live. Welcome aboard, everyone. I'm only going to do a short live because I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do this on Sunday. I got put under today at a doctor's appointment, and the last time that it happened, for the next few days, I was completely feverish and wiped out, and I'm actually feeling pretty good right now. So I decided to go live. Frank, what's up, my man? I was just saying I decided to go live because I'm not sure I'm going to be feeling well Sunday. I got put under today at the doctor. Oh, and I didn't get a chance to get by the post office to check on that shipping charge yet. Been juggling work and doctor's appointments and crap like that. So Monday, I'll get that checked out for you. It's Basmas Eve. Oh, is your season starting tomorrow? Y'all fired up? Now, what day is it? It's almost the 4th of July. You guys, season doesn't even start until the summer, which up there, man, it's probably spring for you, right? Three folks. Welcome aboard, everyone. What did I call the title of this thing? Patterns in the data, things you need to know about pond management. These are all ideas that we can take and use as anglers too. Obviously, you guys know that. Battery's charged. Unplug that. Just give it a few seconds here and see if anybody comes in. Start the conversation. Oh, that's cool, Frank. I appreciate you, man. Big Malone, what's up, my man? It's 7:57 according to that post, and I am going to cut this off right before 9 because Rudd has got Dr. Salmons coming on. Man, that guy was I met him at the Shoaly Palooza deal with Drew put on over in Thomaston, Georgia, on the shoal bass tournament. And man, I learned so much talking from him. I want to watch him talk again, and hopefully I can get him on here. I've been helping him a little bit, doing a little social media consulting. He seemed real interested in promoting, what he does online. And yeah, so he had a few questions. He's like all of us, a little bit older. He doesn't quite know what's going on on the social media front. So he's been sending me questions about things that I've been doing, and I've been trying to help Dr. Salmons out. He's a cool guy, a real smart guy. Actually, without his help, I wouldn't have caught that shoal bass on the fly rod at all. So, what's up, John? Oh, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you guys listening. I just got fully monetized too, so all of the nonsense is out of the way for being a YouTube partner. I got my 4,000 watch hours. Started doing lives every week, sometimes more than that, as you guys know. Let's see. I think it was around November last year. So, I don't know, 7-8 months. Got 4,000 hours. Thank you, Dexter. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you sharing all those memberships with those men. That was very kind of you. And added to the watch hours. That's what's critical, I think, is the watch hours. I did that little post today, the same one I did on Instagram about it was Alex holding the fish, but I just voiced it over. So it was literally the same video with the same video title that I used on another video, Understanding Bass Growth. And I posted it, went, I don't know, a couple of hours without looking at the phone, maybe 3 hours, went back and looked. Well, actually right now it's over 11,000 views for today on YouTube. So that one's actually higher than the one that has 1.2 million for the first, period. But you never know how that stuff works. Sometimes they go like crazy, then they plateau and never do anything again. And then sometimes they don't do much and then go like crazy. So I don't understand how all this stuff works that way. Anyway, mixing it up. We're at 8 o'clock. Let's go ahead and move through it. Welcome to all 6 of you. Oh yeah. Here's one. Here's a little fun thing we can do. What's up, Ken? Thanks for joining, man. So I got this dude that follows. I'm not even sure where because he sent me an email. Julian Granger, and he's a bartender out in Nebraska, and he wants to name a drink at his bar after the page, after the aquatic biologist page. He's enjoyed, what he's learned, and he wants to use that, little, I don't know, as a cross promotional deal, try to help me out a little bit. So he threw a question at me today. What would the drink name be for this page? And I was like, man, I know just the group to ask. So think about that. What if the name of this podcast, or what is this? This isn't a podcast. This is me running my mouth, but the name of this page in drink form. There's a little food for thought. I think you're right, Frank. Frank's coming through with a strong point. He's got 3,178 hours. That's probably mostly Frank. And just a little the Jaeger. Yeah. My experience with the Jaeger bomb is when it seems like a good idea to be doing Jaeger bombs, it's time to stop drinking. You've had your fill, your decision making is peaked, and it's gone downhill. And the Jaeger bomb is usually a mistake, especially if you want to consider the rest of your week. For me at this age, anyway. When I was younger, it would have been rough the next day. But I haven't had one of those in many, many, many years. Cough syrup. What is that? Red Bull and Jägermeister? I don't even remember what's in that thing. It's just eek. Generally a bad idea. Big Malone says Big Billy Bass. Big Billy. What is another? Something that rhymes with bass. Well, there's Bass Ale. You could do like a black and tan. I don't know if they've got imports there though. I don't know, boys. Yeah, Frank, I had to give up drinking myself with the little whatever's going with me is not alcohol doesn't agree with me at all anymore. Almost I'm an allergic reaction type of. Yeah, man. Dexter says he likes Guinness. I like Guinness too, man. I miss drinking beer. It's unfortunate. Beer is kind of does me the worst, actually. I don't know what it is about beer, but last few times I've had it, any number of, even just two, really haven't had any positive experiences. Yeah, I was thinking green too. If it was a mixed drink, Big Malone, like green, like the phytoplankton bloom. Ooh, maybe that's a good one. Plankton bloom. I'm gonna make a note of that. The plankton bloom. So what is that? That's probably like a Long Island iced tea with a little splash of sour. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Dexter's going for the plankton bloom. Absinthe. Oh, that's right. It is green. That's a good one, Frank. Absinthe. So maybe a LIT, maybe absinthe. Got to have stuff swimming in it. Yeah, that's a good idea. What about, you know what it could be? It could be just something as simple as like, especially it would include the women with it too. Although guys might not drink it, but like one of those like apple teeny type drinks that's green, like with some apple mix. I don't know. Tito's and OJ. Yeah. Yeah. The old screwdriver. Now I did have the other day I broke down. I was at a Mexican joint and I did have some tequila. And I did not have a massive reaction to tequila, but I think tequila is processed a little bit differently by your system. But I was brave and I actually had to, it was probably a double shot of tequila. Guy bought it for me, so I'm not really, I was having a good conversation about the page again. That's, you know, just run my yap about it. A little fruit pulp. Yeah. Is there fruit pulp in a martini? No, there's not fruit pulp in a martini. There may be like a little like a olive in a martini, right? I don't really drink martinis, so I don't know. Like usually like chicks buying martinis, you know, for $58 a drink. I have had that. I have had those apple ones though. They're actually pretty good. It tastes like a green Jolly Rancher. You know. The Hydrilla Gorilla. I like that one too, man. I'm gonna write that down. Yeah, I was trying to like think about weed control stuff, you know, or like bass population stuff. The bass fillet, or no, that's not good. I like Hydrilla Gorilla better than that. I don't know. I didn't say I drink Appletini. I said I've had an Appletini. Ooh, Pad Crasher, but that's a good one, Flippin'. That's a good one. Is that the name of a lure? Isn't there a Pad Crasher? Isn't there a Pad Crasher lure? Isn't that like a frog lure? Oh, a fish bowl. Oh yeah. You know, that would be good for the plankton bloom if it was one of those fish bowl kind of drinks. Yeah. Yeah, see, I knew it, man. I knew it. I knew you guys would come through for me, man. Because I was thinking today, I was like, what would I call that? And I couldn't think of anything catchy. Yeah, that would be right, Flipping. That's what we need. That's how we're gonna make our riches, man. It ain't gonna be educating people on how to properly manage a fish population. It's gonna be on selling legal drugs, which I'm all for. Ooh, the aquatic hypnotic. Big Malone is just coming through in the clutch. I mean, he's way ahead of you, Frank. I'm disappointed. I'll call it Frank's Appletini. uh, that's right, Flippin'. As long as it pays the daggone bills, man. I'm kind of liking Frank's Appletini. And Frank's Appletini is short bass season. We get to fish for bass for 27 minutes in Canada. The season starts at 8:52 a.m. You know, because why not just pick a random number, and it ends at 9:45. That's your bass season. Good luck, dude. The aquatic hypnotic, yeah. Okay, so what is it though? A Cosmo? Can they make a green Cosmo? Is that a possible thing to do? I don't even know what's in I think a Cosmo was like cranberry, right? I was never a bartender. I usually just drink like beer and vodka mostly, just like a vodka tonic or. Yeah. I'm thinking the plankton bloom. Well, I like them all though, but that's some good ideas, boys. That's some good ideas. Okay. So be thinking about those. Maybe you'll come up with another one as we talk. And what time we got? 8:11. 9 o'clock is when Rudd kicks off. So I'm getting off by 9 so I can watch that because that's going to be good. But dude is my boy's wicked smart. You remember that? Is that it wasn't Rounders, that was the other one. With Robin Williams. Goodwill Hunting. Yeah, Dr. Sam's wicked smart, man. Okay, so the 3 ideas that I had to get into some kind of pond management stuff before, or lake management, because kind of the same, really. We're talking about these things. My note says harvesting bass makes it easier to catch big bass, and that is true. That is something that I have noticed over many years of doing my job. And I mentioned it in the comments on Instagram. I don't know if everybody reads the comments or everybody hangs out here or whatever. But one of the first ponds, if you're going up 85 in Atlanta, when you get outside, just outside 285, which is the circle that goes around Atlanta, and you're heading towards Charlotte. Nowhere near Charlotte, though. You're way closer to Atlanta. You'll go past a little road called Beaver Ruin Road. And if you got off there and made a right and snaked back a couple miles off the highway, that little pond was about 5 acres. It was back there. And good Lord knows, I don't even know how I got that client, but it was one of my very first clients. And I got in there and I didn't even have an electrofishing boat at that point. I was so green. So I just went fishing. I just started catching fish and doing relative weight measurements and looking at, what was going on with the bluegill population. And I didn't realize, maybe I did realize, thinking back on it, I'm pretty sure I did know that it was crappie because they told me. You just asked the fishermen around. That was always the first thing that I did, was anybody who fished the lake, I asked to meet with them, even if they weren't with the board or whatever. And what's up, Kayak? Southeast Georgia Kayak. Welcome aboard. Oh, that's a good question, Ken. Before we get started on the thing, Ken's got an actual real question there. Yes, turnover. Well, let me read it out for anybody listening, like John, who's not watching. You hear about the water turnover when the water temperature flips. Is that a real thing? Absolutely, it's a real thing. How that works. Okay. And it only works in like a little bit bigger bodies of water normally. Like a pond generally won't stratify too much. So what is stratification? If we use the screen, or you imagine, let's just imagine a cake, so I don't have to use my hands that much. Okay. And let's just say a small pond, again, let's go with 5 acres, is super deep. Like, and I've seen them before, like 28 feet deep at the dam. Okay. And it slopes back up because it's in a valley and they just dammed a valley up. So you've got a super deep pond that's pretty small for that depth, right? Okay. That's a dangerous situation. And I discourage guys to stay away from it. Especially like on that particular pond, they just built it that way. That's how it worked out. They didn't go and excavate a bunch of dirt out of the bottom. But I have seen that too, where the guys had a perfectly legit, like 10-foot, 12-foot deep pond that he spent an extra 250 stacks to dig out another 15 feet deep. But he didn't understand pond management. He didn't understand limnology. He wasted his money on that 250,000. In smaller bodies of water, you don't need a lot of depth. And it's for that reason right there. You really don't even want a lot of depth. So what happens? Let's think of a layered cake, right? Where we've got like a top layer is green. We're going to say it's got green food coloring, right? And then we've got a bottom layer that's say chocolate. It's black. And the green layer cake is say 2 inches thick, but the black layer of the cake underneath the is 4 inches thick. So it's not an evenly distributed amount of cake. The top layer is smaller than the bottom layer. Or another way to put it is the volume of cake or volume of water on the top layer is less than the volume of water on the bottom layer. Why are those layers separate? Temperature. That's the only reason. As the summertime heats up, okay, the top layer of water gets the most heat, and the bottom layer of water is cooler. And anybody who's ever jumped into a pond or lake knows it gets cooler the deeper you go, and it does it pretty quick. So what you get is just like that layered cake. You get a layer of water over a layer of water, right? And the only thing that differentiates the layers is water temperature, because colder water is denser. So you've got lighter water density wise riding on a layer of cooler water density wise. Now in small ponds and bigger lakes, you'll get oxygen under the thermocline, but the line in between those two, the imaginary line between those two layers, is the thermocline. In ponds, once you drop below the thermocline, the oxygen will zero out, right? So we have a layer of water with a higher volume with no oxygen underneath a layer of water. The green layer at the top has less volume, like we stated before, than the bottom. So the oxygen is in the top layer, but it has less volume of water than the deep, dark, rich chocolate layer, right? And that black layer is a good representation for that water, because if you pull it off in the drain, it comes out black, looks like coffee coming out, and it stinks usually too, because that's where everything falls down and rots into that bottom, detritus in the bottom down there, and there's no oxygen down there. So if in the middle of the summer where you get a real high discrepancy where it's been hot, right? But then all of a sudden it comes in with like one of those 80-degree days or 85-degree days, and you get like a super cold rain that drops hail, and one of those situations, and it cools that top layer off to the point where the temperatures are the same now. Okay, so what you'll get is a mixing, because the only thing that separated the top layer from the bottom layer is the temperature. So if that surface water gets cooled, and especially dangerous in the summer, because the hotter the water, the lower the oxygen. So we have less volume of water with oxygen, and it's really hot water, so it's naturally holding less oxygen due to temperature. When those layers mix, the oxygen will diffuse across all the way to the bottom of the pond, and since it's such a huge layer of water in that deep pond, it will drop the oxygen levels below 4 parts per million and kill your fish. So that's a summer turnover. So if you see that, that's generally how that sets up and how that works. That's a good question, Ken. I hope that helps, and follow up with any other questions there. We got a bunch of comments. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Everybody talking amongst themselves. Oh, how do you know the lake has a turnover? Well, if in the situation I just described, it's really easy. In like the hot months, July, August, September, when it's really, really hot, and you have a turnover, your fish die, and it would just waste the pond, just guillotine. Now, you'll have a turnover here in the south. We'll have one up north. The ice, there will be two. When the ice comes off, that's another kind of the inverse of what I just described. You'll have two turnovers, right? but it's different up north, and I'm so far removed from the northern ponds, I wouldn't even be able to articulate the spring turnover very well. I'll look that up and then come back and address that on the next live, because I don't want to tell you guys something wrong. But I'm just very familiar with articulating that turnover I just described, because I've seen it before. And we don't get the spring turnover. We just get one a year here. But the difference is, and you can actually see it in the thermocline too, as the fall cools down, right? And the surface temperature starts to drop naturally. It's not a drastic swing in surface temperature. It is a gradual change, and the water's cooling in the fall, right? It didn't happen in the heat of the summer when the oxygen levels are their lowest. So as that surface water cools off naturally, it begins to hold more and more oxygen. So instead of having like 6.5, parts per million oxygen in the summer, probably in the fall, the water will be cooler, and it will be like 9.5, say. I'm just pulling randoms. You'd have to test every pond. Everyone will be a little bit different. But the point being is when that turnover occurs in the fall, the water's cooler. And actually what will happen too is that thermocline will get a little bit deeper as the water cools before the turnover. So you'll have a higher volume of water with oxygen, but then you will get the fall turnover. And generally what you see there, Gator, is it'll shift colors. It'll kind of shift to like a brown color. The lake will go from, like, if it was a green color or a clear color, it will shift to like a brown color. A week or two, maybe a little bit longer. It depends on the season, but that's generally the visual that you will see. Now, if you have an oxygen meter, you'll see oxygen go all the way down to the bottom of the lake or pond. That'd be another way that you could identify it. But I would say the easiest way, just like is in the field, visually observing, it's a drastic color shift really quick in the fall of the year, where the lake was one color, then it kind of shifts to a brown or a green brown color, or even almost like a tea color. Sometimes it just gets a weird look in the fall, and that's a natural turnover. I mean, you get turnovers every season. So that's a natural process that occurs on deeper bodies of water. Now, in shallower ponds, going back to my point, in shallower ponds, you won't get that turnover, because you only might have, like, if you got a 10-foot deep pond and you got, like, say 9 feet of oxygen, you only got 1 foot of, a little bit of no oxygen water. So if that happened to turn over, the volumes of water are opposite. You have more water up top with oxygen and less volume water down low. You won't get a fish kill from that kind of shallower pond in the summertime. So it's only really kind of critical to watch on your deeper bodies of water where you get a real noticeable stratification and a real shallow thermocline. Things that'll make the thermocline shallow: a fertilization program where you got like 24 inches of visibility on your plankton. Well, that'll, like I said, in the fall when the water's cooler, you'll have a deeper thermocline. But if you have a dense plankton bloom, that'll bring that thermocline up tighter and make it shallower, because the light penetration can't go down as far. And I'm summarizing a vast array of variables here. So, they're, again, take it for what it's worth, but that's kind of the ballpark that we're in there. Oh, yeah, no problem, Ken. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. If I had 3 rods ready to go tomorrow, what do I have tied on? I actually do have 3 rods ready to go tomorrow. It's a good question, Big Malone. I'll give you a hint. Only one of them is made by Mike Muka. Yeah, Dexter, you can see on a good graph, you can see the thermocline on the graph. And in like bigger reservoirs, when you start getting out into hundreds or thousands of acres, which is, starting to punch above my weight a little bit, especially thousands. I've dealt with hundreds of acres. I've actually dealt with 1,000 acres before, but that was actually my top end. Usually don't find too much private water that big. but you will see thermoclines, like multiple thermoclines on bigger reservoirs too. And again, it goes into variables that I can't even articulate. I'm not that great a limnologist, and I didn't pay that much attention because, well, I knew I was going to be managing ponds. So that's another thing I'll look up, though. I'll make note of that. I got to look up the winter turnover and explain that. Something to do about the ice coming off. Like I said, I haven't talked about that in 30 years. And multiple thermoclines. Which kind of touches back to what we were talking about on Lake Lanier the other day, where the thermocline, the density of the differentiation between the density of the water creates that false bottom, and the dead plankton that dies, and it's called the epilimnion and hypolimnion. If you're really into technical scientific terms, the epilimnion's got the oxygen, the hypolimnion doesn't have the oxygen, and that layer, that thermocline layer, is there such a drastic difference in Lanier and the density of the water that it literally, like the little microscopic plankton that fell down, hit that density and didn't sink past it all the way down to the bottom of the pond. So late in the summertime, it's creating this layer of rotting material, and that rotting process consumes oxygen. So you can drop an oxygen meter down in Lanier, and you'll hit that layer of dead plankton in August and September, and the oxygen meter will drop out, and then you get underneath it and it'll rise back up, because like I said, bigger lakes are different, and you don't hold oxygen a little bit deeper in a little bit different way. So there'll be like this 6 or 8 foot band of water where all that rotting plankton is, that it's not holding any oxygen. And that's very detrimental to like fish like striper, because it's a 30,000 acre reservoir. Striper are cold water fish, which means they're high oxygen fish. Same with the trout. So as there gets to be more and more nutrient runoff, and Lake Lanier turns greener and greener, and more plankton falls and stacks up on that, it's going to make it less and less and less, for lack of a better term, good water for striper population. And you'll be knowing it's real bad on a lake like that when they start going to wipers, hybrid stripers, white bass striper. That's how we get wiper. There's a cross, and those behave in the same way as striper. Open water, fast predators, crush every souls out of everything swimming out there. But since they're crossed with white bass, they're much more tolerant of warm water. So generally, when you see wipers, you're dealing with a shallow body of water that's warm, that striper can't live in. And so the states will stock wipers in there to try to control those open water herring and shad species. Yeah, Ken, it does. The turnover generally doesn't produce good fishing for that period of time. Oh, thanks, Dexter. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it if you're in 10 feet or less in ponds. Again, if there's, if it does stratify, and usually like in ponds, like even in like a 1 acre pond, probably like 6-7 feet normally, you'll get a thermocline. Again, it depends on the density of the plankton as well. Super green pond will stratify. If it's a clear pond, though, you're going to have oxygen up and down it. So again, there's a million variables that change these general ideas up. But in 10 feet of water, no, I would not be. I wouldn't be worried about turnover. It's a good guess on the bull shad, but it is not the bull shad. Not the bull shad. And it is big. It's 11-inch bait. 11. It's a tank of a bait. Okay. Yeah, Gator, you know what I'm talking about if you've been a scuba diver. You feel it instantly, don't you? Like as soon as you drop past it, it just gets colder. I mean, big time. It's pretty cool. All right, going back to harvest, the first idea, and I'm at 8:30, so I got 30 minutes to cover 3 topics, or I'll mess up my. Um, yeah, you like that, man? I stopped. I went to Valdosta my first 2 years of college, and there was traffic on 75, and so I stopped through. I haven't been there, in, oh my god, since 1994, I think, or five, maybe. No, when my buddy graduated in '95, I went back to campus. So 1995 was the last time I was at Valdosta's campus. I've stopped and got fuel there a few times, but I didn't actually go to campus, you know. So I had to pick up some gear. It's pretty sweet gear too, man. It's nice shirts. I got a nice button up, and I got this one, and I got a nice Valdosta State hat. I should have wore it, so I'd be matching. Valdosta was a fun time, man. I had a good time there. Big Malone, just DM me your address, or you can just text it to me here, and I'll just mail you one. So you guys all can put my cell phone number and text me anytime you got questions or need anything from me. It's no problem. It's already been sold across the internet so many times. I've got the Robo Killer on it, so it's best to text. I won't usually pick up phone calls at all. But if you boys need anything from me, just shoot me a text with your name, and I'll get you straightened out. All right. So, yeah, Josh, it is going to be a good one. You got a point there. It'll be a real good one. All right. So back to Indian Trail, Beaver Ruin Road area of Atlanta and the 5 Acre Pond. I'm going to say I did know there was crappie in there, but the bass population was pretty stunted. They were pretty small, just stacked up in that 1 pound size class. So I went crappie fishing. It was in the spring when I picked it up. And the first thing that I kind of noticed was I'd caught an absolutely massive, like, I think it was like 2.5 pound crappie. So that was my first indication that the crappie population wasn't way out of control, because they'll all be hand sized, they'll all be paper thin. Flipping Kicks can attest to it. He's got a little bit of a stunted crappie population going on over there. So when you see big, massive crappie in a pond, that is a visual indicator that they haven't ruined it yet. But I still had bass probably averaging 83, 85% relative weight. You know, they weren't great, but I had clones. I had just, you know, say 12.5-inch bass that were like, instead of being a pound as the standard, they were like probably like 0.7 pounds. They were not in good shape. They had been there a long time. They were long and skinny with a big head, a big eye. And it was like, okay, I'm going to roll the dice with this one and harvest some of these bass out. And so that's what I did. And I harvested crappie as well, but took some bass out. I took a bunch of bass out too, about 100 out of that lake. And then we had a kind of a winter break. The pond management be seasonal that way, unless they have you picking up trash or doing something like that in the wintertime. Normally you'd come back the next spring and start up the program again. So we had feeders going, feeding our bluegill to help them get bigger and compete against the crappie, very similar to what we got at Flipping Kicks' pond. And we removed some bass because they were just terrible in, the terrible condition, under 12 inches and under standard weight badly. Well, inevitably in any bass heavy pond like that, you're going to get some bass that for whatever reason get past that 1 pound mark. And then again, like kind of on the post I was talking about, think about a 9 pound bass's mouth, right? It's like a 1 gallon paint bucket. It's a big, big mouth. So pretty much anything in the pond can fit down a 9 pounder's gullet. He can pretty much eat, unless you're up north and you're dealing with something just, completely different than I was. A 9 pounder's running that show. And you'll get a few of them. And that's what will confuse guys too, because every once in a while in those stunted, terrible populations, you'll get a kicker fish like that. And that will lead you to believe that the 350 1 pounders that you caught the guys can't seem to tie that together. That, remember, I've used this before, diversity of size wins the prize. We want 1 pound bass, 2 pound bass, 3 pound bass, 4 pound bass. That's how I know I'm dealing with a healthy bass population. When I've got all 1 pounders and a 9 pounder, I'm off. That's not good. So the most available forage for that 9 pound bass was 1 pound bass. They were everywhere. And the next year I got an electrofishing rig and really put the whooping on them, and put a whooping on the crappie too, because I got them coming off the bed and just harvested like mad. So what happened was, one of the kids, he's like 9 or 10 years old, he had been fishing out there for a couple of years, and little shallow water, 3-foot dock. And he got real used to catching those 1 pounders. He'd get the bite, fishing plastic worms, he'd get the bite and he'd rip their head off and just reel them in, rip their head off, reel them in. That's Big Malone's address coming through. I gotta ship something to Frank too, Big Malone. So it'll probably be Monday. So his dad calls me up, says he's washing the dishes, and he can look out through his kitchen window there and watch his son, just keeping an eye on him. It's 9 around the pond. That's only smart, right? And he's watched him 1,000 times, just out there, just whacking these bass alone out there. He doesn't need any help. He's good to go. Casting a bait caster at 9, he's a kid after my own heart. Well, we pulled all the 1 pound fish out, or let's rephrase that a different way, right? We removed the primary source of forage for the 9 pound bass. And we had a feeder going the year prior, and the feeder had been fired up that spring. And this was early summer because the kid was out of school. So there had been a good, 15, 16 month window of adjustment period on that pond. So when we took all the 1 pounders out and replaced it with the bluegill that were pumping feed in, we shifted the population dynamics for that 9 pounder. That 9 pounder can't sit back and eat 1 pound meals anymore, right? They're gone. I took them out. But then the bluegill replaced it. So I'm taking fish out that are like this and replacing it for fish that are like this. So that 9 pounder has a completely different environment to make a living in now, right? That fish didn't eat no 1 pound meal sitting back for a week and going and eating another 1 pound meal, like he feeding like an alligator once or twice a month. Oh no. Now that joker's got to go feed, and he's got to feed on smaller stuff. So think about that, especially back then. This was in the 97, 8 time frame. There were no glide baits. There were no big lures. The biggest lure you could find was like a big plastic worm, like one of those big man jelly worms that are about a foot long. That was probably the biggest thing on the market at the time. So nobody was fishing. It was all rattle traps and, rapalas or rapala, however you guys want to call that. Worms, where everything was small. But again, just use common sense, right? We shifted the population away from 1 pound fish that 9 pounder is eating to smaller bait that it has to eat more often. You just made that 9 pounder easier to catch, which is exactly what happened to the 9-year-old kid. And his dad says he's sitting out there watching him. He could tell, he's fishing with his worm. So he gave it that little 2-3 second pause, where you kind of give him your hands and tighten the line, get it just right, and then rip their head off. Well, he'd been fishing a lock drag. He'd never had to worry about his drag before catching the 1 pounders. His dad said he ripped into that thing, and that rod tip came back around and just about touched the handle. I mean, it just about went parabolic when that 9 pounder went to pulling against it. And he was fishing with rope. I think he had like 20 pound test on his bait caster. So it didn't bust, but he didn't have any slip in the drag. So his dad said he's kind of rocked back like that. And the fish just started pulling right off into the pond. But it wasn't very deep in front of the dock. And the kid scrambled around, didn't lose the rod, didn't even lose his cool, he said. Next thing you know, he's got his hands up in the air, recovering, all the line they lost. And he had a good hook set. So he had pinned the 9, and it's jumping out there. His dad's running outside. His mom's running outside. and the kid lands a 9-pound bass. And that was the first time that I saw that happen. And they wanted to give me credit for growing such a big fish, and I was like, no, 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 that fish was already there. 9-pound bass. It takes a few years to get one that big, probably like 4. So that's not something that I grew there. That was existing there. Alls I did was change the population to make that fish catchable. And that's something I know these guys aren't thinking about and talking about. And because quite frankly, I haven't even hardly mentioned that online before. And I don't even think most of the biologists are sharp enough to make that observation. You have to do this job for a really long time, but that's a pattern that I noticed over and over and over again. I would go remove those 1-pounders. I would get the 1-pounders in check, and then all of a sudden, bang, trophy, bang, trophy. It starts producing some nice fish. So just an example of how harvesting the pond skews it in your favor for bigger fish, to be able to catch and land bigger fish. Oh, nice, man. I'll be down there. I'll be down there on Wednesday, and then yeah, I got to work on Tuesday. I picked up a little part-time job down here just because I've been bored. But I think there's like a fishing tournament going on Monday. I'm not going to that. Maybe Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm not sure on that one, Southeast. But and then Friday, I think I'm paddling with Drew Gregory somewhere, maybe Silver Springs, maybe Rainbow Springs. I can't remember, but I think we're going to do something. He mentioned that the last time I talked to Drew. So I'll ask him if it's cool if you come, and maybe you want to come because they kind of ditching on Friday to go fishing. But throw my number in your phone, man. Just throw me a text. We'll hook up at iCast. All right, how much time we got? All right, we got 15, 17 minutes. We're good. Okay, so I've got my notes are written. Crappie and other competing species like green sunfish will reduce the bass weights, and they'll never be as big as Sugar Hill Outdoors. So right now, our Sugar Hill Outdoors fish are ranging from probably like 115% relative weight to some of them are as high as 145. Generally, those ones I'm getting that are 145 though are scoliosis fish. They have a little crook in their back, so they're not quite as long as they should be. So let's just call it 115 to 130% to be realistic. And one side note to that, when you've got bass that high, it's kind of tips me off. When your relative weights go over 120 or so, it tips me off that you're artificially kind of manipulating the system, because you won't get those super high relative weights like that in like natural lakes or ponds that aren't being fed. And it's because the standard weight chart was designed on public water fish, on fish that weren't on feed or weren't being boosted with a fertilizer bloom, plankton bloom with fertilizer. They were actually averaged from all over the United States, from the north to the south, east to west. They took electrofishing data, I think from about the 50s. But the thing to remember on that is they took electrofishing data from the 50s. Well, guess what was going on in the 50s? A lot of bass harvest. People didn't throw bass back then. If we were to do the same thing now, it would be a completely different. That's why I like using the old data, because it actually gives me kind of a healthy reference point of a bass population, because our bass populations right now are not healthy. It would be a completely different chart if you tried to use data from modern lakes, done after 1980, especially if you did it now after 4 decades of catch and release. Your average or standard bass weights would be significantly lower. But that being said, if you have crappie or green sunfish or other forms of competing fish, like out here, tilapia, are going to start negatively impacting this place. Already have in a lot of places in Florida. Made a post about that, about all the competing fish that there is in Florida. That is going to start taking away from bass fishing, taking away from the bass population, and it's not coming back. You're not going to correct it. And I see this all the time because generally, like when you're a private pond or lake manager, you're dealing with either an affluent community or a very affluent pond owner, because to own a pond, you got to have some bread, or a small lake. You got to have some money. And they just seem to have this mindset that throwing money at it is how you fix it. It's how they fix things in business. It's how they fix things at the house. It's how they fix things. You just take a gangster's roll of cash and throw it at the lake, and I'm going to fix it that way. And now, trust me, there's plenty of dudes out there that'll take that roll of cash and tell you, "Oh, yes, sir, I can totally fix that for you, sir." I challenge anyone, because I've never seen it. You can take as much money as you want. You can go buy as many crawfish as you want. You can go buy as many pounds of threadfin shad and stock them as you want. You can do all those other things that you want. Hell, you can even put a feeder on it and feed the bluegill up like I just described at Sugar Hill. Even then, sometimes when it's out of whack due to competition, nothing brings those bass weights back to the point where I'm talking about at Sugar Hill, where we're rocking at 120%. You know, you're not going back there with competing fish. That's not happening. And when I say measurable difference, say you take $10,000 and put it into your lake, and then the next in your average relative weight is 84%, and you come back the next year and your average relative weight is 85%. To me, that's not a standard deviation different. That's not that's inside the same, mass, so to speak. You haven't actually changed anything. The only thing you've done is taken that guy's $10,000, put it in your pocket, spent some money on some fish, spent some money on some junk, pocketed the rest. You got no measurable difference. And I noticed that pattern many, many times. So for you dudes out there, MD or whoever's got some bread, don't put that in your mind that that's going to fix it, and if you do, at least get an average relative weight, pull 20, 30, 40 bass, get their relative weights, do it before and after like I did, and show me that it made a measurable difference in the bass growth. Sorry about that, boys. I don't know what's going on. I'm back. You boys still here? That's the second time my modem. Sometimes my modem will get jinky, but it was all green, so I'm not sure what was going on there. Sorry about that, fellas. Yeah, the daggone skunk apes out there rattling the cage or something, man. You're right about that. So that was my little spiel about competition. What's up, Tim? Who knows what's going on? We got 10 more minutes before Rudd comes on. So the last one. Oh, yeah. So again, a comment that I'm pulling this off of comments that I've made earlier today and throughout the week, talking about harvesting bass. All right. So there's been a very consistent pattern. A show of hands here. Who's caught a fish over 12 pounds? 12-1, 12-2, 13, 13-1, 13-2, 14, 15. Anybody here caught one that big? Just 12 plus. They're very rare fish. It's kind of like Southeast, you got one. Good for you, man. Was that in public water or was that a privately managed lake or pond? 14. That's a beast of a fish. I've only seen one fish bigger than that in my entire career on a shocking rig. Not even close, Mike. I know, right? It's very rare. Come on, Frank. You can at least lie. Oh, from a private farm pond. All right. So here's a question for you. Because my experience with a private farm pond fishing and 14 or 12 plus pound bass, I've seen a few of them. I would say now, or at least had calls on them from guys who are relatively honest and seen pictures. But 12 plus pound bass are going to come from in a pond are going to come from one of two places. It's brand new and 4 to 5 years old and stocked properly, managed properly. You might get 1 to 12. Or if it's an older pond, the owner of that pond put a fillet knife on every bass they caught under 8 pounds. And by pond, I mean under 30, 40 acres, that ballpark. And that's a very consistent pattern that I've seen with guys that, not just one fish either, guys that consistently caught just these like 10 pounders were a deal. Like we're not a big deal. Actually, we're caught, and like 8, they would catch a fish better than 8 every time they went fishing. Like it'd be a bad day where the fish were just shut down if they didn't catch an 8 out of ponds like that. And if it was done, they didn't fool around. They were old school, man. Again, it was the group of people, the generation, 2 generations before us, where if it hit the line, it went in the cooler. You know, yeah, they might throw a big one back, the really big one back, but most of the fish, most of the crappie, or most of the bluegill, or most of the bass that they caught in the cooler, in the cooler, in the cooler. There you go. What did I say? He fed his family out of it for 70 years in the cooler, right? That's not an accident. I was able to say that. You know what I'm saying? Like every single time. Yeah, Tim, you got that right. 12 plus is a whole lot of fish. Every single time I've consistently seen big fish come out of a pond, less than 40-acre body of water, dudes were just like that. Old school farm dudes, big families. You're not throwing groceries back, son. We're here to have some fun and catch some fish, but we also have 5 kids to feed that work the farm. My man Mickey Wilson was one of them. He's usually on here. He might be in here somewhere. I don't know. Oh, he's on vacation. He's probably about neck deep in margaritas or something over on the coast. But his mom caught a 13, and old school, man. She would yeet that big man's worm. She would put that big man's worm out in the middle of the pond, cast it out, put the rod down, bust out the brim buster. Y'all know what a brim buster is, don't you? It's like a cane pole. Bust out the cane pole, get the live bait, the crickets, the worms, whatever, and sit there and be catching bluegill, right? Cooler. Everything that hit a cricket in the cooler, little bass in the cooler, little bluegill in the cooler. Didn't matter what hit that anything that hit that cane pole's going in the cooler. And then she'd put that thing down after a few minutes and pick that worm up and move it about 6 inches and put that plastic worm back down and open the bail back up. And she'd keep an eye on that line. Every once in a while, you know, that line get a bite, that plastic worm bite's easy. You see that line jump, you see it start pulling that line. She picked that rod up and bass fish and bluegill fish at the same time. And again, a female fisherman with a 13-pound bass, you know, that's a rarity. A 13-pound bass is so rare anyway. How many women you know caught one? But those two things go hand in hand. The harvest of the pond and the giant fish. And it just reinforces the point I've tried to make 100 times over. If you're trying to manage bass fisheries and you're playing this catch and release nonsense that you're hearing on the socials, you're doing it wrong. It ain't gonna work. You're gonna catch a lot of fish. Yeah, you might hold up an 8 or 9 pound fish, just like I described before. But again, define big. Of course, big to Frank in Canada and big to us down here in Florida and Georgia is two different things. But honestly, though, even in Georgia, most of those lakes don't throw off fish any bigger than 7 or 8 pounds. And the reason is because when they get to that 1 pound stunted class that nobody will keep anymore, it takes them 5 years to get out of it. And once they finally get out of it, their growth is going again, but they've missed like 3 to 5 years of growth being stuck at 1 pound. So now you're dealing with an older fish that should be pounds bigger. And then it goes to feeding on bass. And yeah, it grows quick again, like kind of like Sugar Hill, or it puts on 2 pounds a year. But now it's way past its prime. It's gone off. It hasn't had every single year to grow. So they go to about 8 or 9 pounds, and that's the end of their life. They run out of time. So that's why you see that. And Dex, you out there right now. Awesome. There you go. Flipping knows what I'm talking about. It's that old school mentality, boy. But I tell you what, that old school mentality grows some fish. Go back and look at the bass fishing pictures from the 70s. You got to go back to the 70s before catch and release. And like one dude made a comment today on Instagram. It's way down in the comments of whatever. But he said, my dad went fishing, and he was an older guy, probably a little older than me, in his late 50s. And my dad went fishing at the local lake and brought back 5 to 8 pound bass, a stringer full of them every week for decades. The man would go hammer big bass, bring them home and eat them. And it never stopped producing big bass. And that's the part these dudes just don't get, because they've never seen it. It's just not something that's even remotely in their realm, on their radar. It ain't happening. This catch and release stuff has got everybody brainwashed. All right, let me scroll through the comments. We're 2 minutes to 9, and we're going to get off and go watch Rudd. Hell no, they can't, man. Too much catch and release. They got one at that down by Brown Bait Company, that Oglethorpe Pond, Ogle something down there. There was a 100-acre lake they stocked. They got one of 13-1 in 4 years. But there's no harvest over there. Nobody's keeping anything. And again, a brand new pond, you got a shot at first 5-6 years on a brand new lake or pond. You got a shot right then. And then if you're not managing it right, if you're not harvesting it, you can hang it up. You ain't seeing a fish go over double digits. And Southeast can attest to that. You've been all over. You don't hardly see them anymore, do you? That's right. Get the grease hot. All right, boys. 9 o'clock. Let's go watch Rudd. Appreciate you joining. 15 tonight. Awesome. Retirement money. If YouTube ever decides to cut me a check. But that's it. That's what I had to cover. It was a good one. It was a short one, but that's okay. And